Hello, and welcome to another great show here with your host, Paul Greaves. And today we welcome a fantastic author, Dianne Kaye. Now, Dianne lives in the Pacific Northwest and draws inspiration to write from the many courageous people she has met during her 20 years of human services as youth worker, addiction counselor, family therapist, and HIV case manager. Kaye has published her first novel, Misled, in 2016 and attended the Hollywood Book to Screen Pitch Fest in November. Several production companies have recommended the story for adaptation to a studio feature film. Independent Global Summit House in New York has partnered with Universal Studios to release the screenplay for Misled. Kaye patiently awaits an option from Hollywood. That's fantastic. And Dianne, as I just said to our audience out there, you've got these 3 books and you've released 2 of them already, and I can't wait to find out more about them. So first of all, tell the audience out there, what really got you into writing these books?
I guess it was a combination of 3 different things. I have a master's degree and worked 20 years in human services, as you explained there. And I met so many women who made the wrong choice in men and suffered dire consequences. It made me, I was sort of compelled then to write a book about a woman who gets involved with an unsavory character. In my research, I discovered the religious concept of soul ties, which explained to me the reason why women don't leave abusive relationships. And at the same time, I was doing some research in my family history, and I got very interested in the migration of the Germanic tribes across Europe. And in my research, I discovered these coins that were used in Germany called bracteates. And that sort of formed the background to my story. So I wrote Misled about a woman who went to Germany with an ex-boyfriend, ex-coworker, in search of her family fortune. These bracteates were deposited in a bank in Dusseldorf in 1880 by her great-great-great-grandfather, and her boyfriend, Stephan Peltzini, found the deposit, and so let her know that that deposit was there, and all she had to do was go after it. And so Jade Anne, a.k.a. Nadine Jaden Hawk, traveled to Germany after these bracteates. While she was there, she witnessed a murder. And when she came back to Seattle, then she was arrested for co-conspiracy. And so I did a lot of research in terms of criminal law investigations and courtroom procedures, and that led me to ending the book with a lot of courtroom drama. It was pretty exciting. I sort of took the journey with Jade Anne as I wrote the book. I was pretty impressed with the characters, the way in which they just kind of led me through from start to finish.
Wow. Dianne, that sounds fantastic. Well, you've got me hooked on this already. You've taken me across to Europe. Took me back to 1880 and this the bracteates, these gold coins. So it sounds fascinating, and I love the way that you've kind of incorporated your own family background with your kind of professional work.
Yes.
When you were working. So how did you kind of tie both of them into the novel?
Her relationship with Stephan, Jade Anne's, or he called her Natty from her first name. They worked together, and they developed a really strong relationship. They developed a strong soul tie, and then something happened at work in which they were terminated, and so they split up. She moved up to Seattle from the LA area, and he went to the Southern Pacific, and they didn't have any contact with each other for about 5 years. And then when he discovered, he'd done some research and discovered this fortune, then he was compelled to let her know. And so she trusted him enough to go on the trip with him, and so they renewed their soul tie. I discovered that soul ties are developed through intimacy, and sometimes if they're involved in abuse or trauma of some kind, then they're very hard to break, and sometimes that may even take divine intervention. And so when she was in Germany, she witnessed the murder and was put through hell, so to speak, quite a spiritual journey for her, being arrested and jailed and going through a trial. Her attorney, her criminal defense attorney, hooked her up with Dr. Grayson Mounds, who helped her break that soul tie, and he used the armor of God. He was a psychologist priest, and he used the psychological techniques and the armor of God from Ephesians 6 from the Bible to help her break that soul tie to Stephan.
Wow, this honestly sounds so good, and I can just hear in your own words how you're bringing these characters alive. So I'm sure reading them, reading the novels would be a great read, really. So so Dianne, let me ask you, how did you research into these main characters? So you mentioned you have Jade Anne, you have this guy who's shown up again. I think you called is it Stephan?
Yes, Stephan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you do the research into them?
I started with videos about the migration of the Germanic tribes.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a lot of travel videos of Germany and documented all of that. And then I do my research on the internet. Wikipedia is wonderful.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I ordered some books: criminal law handbook, criminal procedures, courtroom procedures, criminal investigations, and I just read and read and read until I knew where I was going with a murder case. As a counselor, I did participate and actually have testified in court and watched a lot of courtroom drama as a result of my casework, working with families specifically. And so I had a little bit of a background, and I just did a lot of reading until I knew where I was going with all of that and could do it in a legitimate way that would make it real for the readers. It took a lot of research, a lot of thinking, a lot of dreaming. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I just, oh my gosh, that's great. And I'd jump up and I'd go to my computer.
Wow.
And like I said, those characters, it seemed like just as soon as I gave a character a name and assigned some personality traits and gave them a little bit of dialogue, they just seemed to carry it away. And I just found myself getting out of the way and just documenting what my characters were doing. I would pick an actor from Hollywood or somebody that I knew for each one of those characters, and then I could just picture how that particular person would play that part and ask myself, how would this character handle that situation? What would this character say? and that there came my answers, my story, my background. I just kind of let them lead me from start to finish.
Wow. No,
Of course, I had to have some villains there. I had to have some real bad guys there too, and so there's a couple of those that are quite interesting characters, and I liked doing the bad guys as well. I really made them kind of background to the story and a deeper meaning to the relationship between Jade Anne and Stephan. Yeah.
That's really interesting, just to hear how you got, the inspiration in the middle of the night, and then that was really interesting on how to hear where you get your insight into how you created the characters. So wow, that's really good.
Yes.
Yeah, really, really, really interesting.
And a lot of it comes from my personal experiences and my background and all the many, many courageous people that I met during 20 years of human services. I am just really impressed with human beings' resiliency to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and keep on trucking.
Yeah, true. Lots of lessons learned there.
Yeah.
Now,
oh yes.
So, obviously from the first novel, Misled, we move on to the second one, Resolution. So how does Jade Anne kind of change from the first one, where she seems a little bit kind of naive to be kind of, pulled in by this Stephan? So what can we kind of see in Resolution?
She still is deeply in love with him, even though she's learned to distrust him as well. She found out he's not necessarily good for his word. But in Resolution, the opening of Resolution is that 3 bracteates are found at a murder scene in San Francisco. And there's a couple of new characters. Crystal Snow, she's a police officer, newly appointed detective from San Francisco Police Department. And her friend, Declan Stone, is an investigative reporter. And he meets her on the murder scene. He writes for a tabloid called The Whisperer. And she mentions these bracteates, and he remembers a story from Seattle where a CIA operative was outed and a woman was charged with co-conspiracy to murder. And he remembers that there was something about that woman who had traveled to Germany for her family fortune. And he also remembered that his really good friend, Lieutenant Mitchell Drummond out of San Diego, ran point on that case 3 years earlier. So he contacts his friend, Drummond. They call him Drum. And Drummond, of course, remembers that he worked with the criminal attorney. He was actually in the courtroom for Jade Anne's trial. He did a lot of investigation and managed to help with her drama in the courtroom. And so he contacts the attorney, and they all put their heads together, and they believe that these 3 bracteates that were found in San Francisco might be part of her family fortune. Somehow they made their way to San Francisco all the way from Germany, and that pulls all of the previous characters into the new story.
And there's the suspense. Oh, I love it. It sounds great. And so Dianne, so obviously Resolution's the second book, and your third one, which comes out next year, Jaden's Grace. Now, were you always kind of expecting to write 3 books, or was it after the first one, Misled, where you realized that you could really take these characters on?
Yes, it was from the first one. I left some loose ends in Misled. If your readers do pick up Misled, they will see that there were some loose ends, and the relationship was sort of left unfinished. And so that's what led me to the second book. That's why I called it Resolution. There needed to be more to the story. She needed Jade Anne, Nadine, Jaden, she went by, eventually Jaden Hawk. She needed a way to finish both of those parts of her life, to finally regain that fortune. She was issued a check that she could not cash because of her two different identities. And also the international agreement was missing, so she was unable to cash the check that she was issued from the bank in Dusseldorf. That was the main loose end. Right. And so she needed a way to finish that, to recapture that. And of course, she had to contact Peltzini to see if he could help, because he was with her at the bank in Dusseldorf and he could be witness. And so that pulls the two of them back together, and gives them the opportunity then to get closure on their relationship.
Very interesting. Now, Dianne, as we come towards
the
end,
and of course, I had to.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
Of course, I had to have a couple more villains in Resolution, and so I had a lot of fun with an antique dealer who came all the way from Germany. And I had to bring in the RAND service, that's Mitchell Drummond's partners, who had done a lot of help in the first book, and they continue to be of great help in the second book. It's pretty exciting, the second book, actually, pretty graphic.
That sounds great.
And also,
No, it honestly, it sounds fascinating, and with all these different characters coming alive, I can really hear it in your words. So,
oh yes, definitely. Yes, and there was a new character. I started to say there's a new character that came into the second book, Resolution, and I have moved her forward in the third book, Jaden's Grace. I put her name is Grace Sanchez. I put her in the prologue in the back of Resolution as a sneak preview to Jaden's Grace. Another new character, very interesting character that Drummond meets in Resolution. That further ties all of the characters together and takes them into the third book. Like I said, the characters have just led me from one to the other. And these new characters, of course, they add more intrigue to the story.
It sounds so interesting how these characters are leading you like to different parts of the world, and new characters are joining in. So it sounds fascinating. So Dianne, as we come towards the end of the interview now, can you tell our listeners out there where can we find out more information, and where can we buy these amazing books?
Oh, thank you for asking. I have a website now. I self-publish through Ex Libris, and they have developed my website now. They've done a wonderful job on production of all of these books, and my website, that is www.diannekaye.author.com. That's DIANNEKAYE author.com. Both books are available on my website, along with a trailer for Misled, a couple of poems that I've included in both books, more background about me, and more background about the inspiration to writing these books. The books are available through Ex Libris on my website, Amazon.com, and Barnes and Noble.
Oh, that's great.
Well.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So Dianne, I really appreciate that. And, just listening about the background of your books and, how the characters come alive, it sounds fascinating. So again, thank you for joining us today, Dianne.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul.
You're welcome. Great. So to our amazing listeners out there, please share this episode with people who would be really interested in these books from Dianne Kaye, and please leave a comment if you can. Thank you, Dianne, again for joining us. It's been absolutely amazing. My name is Paul Greaves. We are done and we are dusted.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Global Summit House podcast. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Podbean, iHeartRadio, iTunes, or Google Play. Connect with us at globalsummithouse.com. See you on the next episode.